There's a very specific reason why I have these handhelds in the corner of this review for the RG28XX from Anbernic. It's because these are the RG35XX series, and these are some of the best handhelds you can get on the market. But you want to know what all these have in common? They all share the H700 chipset, which means this new little tiny handheld that I can fit in one hand like this has the same level of performance as these, which is insane. I will show you some game performance on different emulators, along with some helpful tips, but first let's check out the hardware features. While this packs an awesome performance punch, I'm going to show you how tiny they actually made this. Obviously the screen's smaller on this at 2.8 inches, so if I turn the H over, the XYAB buttons are a lot smaller, and the spacing between them is also smaller. But they're actually very clicky and responsive, and it does not affect my gameplay whatsoever. The most notable size difference for me is the D-pad. This D-pad is microscopic, and to just try to put the D-pad into perspective, it's even smaller than the Game Kitty Pixels. So you get the idea, right? But you want to know something awesome? This D-pad, being so small, is also very responsive, and it's as good as theirs. Now obviously if I put my thumbs over it, all you can see is the screen, so I wouldn't really recommend this for long play sessions, like if you want to beat Link from the past. But if you're traveling, this is a perfect portable little handheld. It's very powerful, and it has a very high build quality. So on the front you do have the one corner speaker like the plus, and the select and start buttons. On the top you have 4 very clicky R and L buttons, the DC OTG port, indicator lights, menu button, and it has a HDMI mini out. That means you can play this on a bigger screen, and it does support 2.4G wireless and wired controllers, but keep in mind that it does not have Bluetooth. It has a 3100 mAh battery on here, which Anbernic is claiming can last up to 8 hours, but again, it's a small mini device, so you probably won't play this for 8 hours straight. And this also has vibration motors in it. On the bottom you've got your headphone jack, your 64GB SD card with your software and your games, and an optional secondary SD card slot to expand your game storage. And while they're very sleek, on the left side you do have your volume buttons, and on the right you've got your power and reset button. So let's power this on and try out some games. You'll notice that there's games in this option called Game Rooms. Those are like standalone emulators, and then next to it is what I'd suggest trying first, which is RetroArch game. So in here you'll have RetroArch, which will run your games mostly for the better, but if you have any troubles in here, just go back and try out standalone emulators and you might have better luck. Older systems like Super Nintendo should work just fine for you. Looney Tunes B-Ball is pretty nostalgic for me. But like I said, if something don't work in RetroArch, just try the standalone emulators on the main menu. I'll give you some tips for accessing RetroArch features in a bit, but first let's jump into some gameplay. So right off the hop, I'm going to play some Dreamcast to show you how this performs. So here I am playing some Soul Calibur, and it's working flawlessly. This chipset works really well with these handhelds, and I'm really glad that they put it in this. And there's something to be said about not having joysticks on newer consoles, but on a handheld this tiny, you won't want them. And the D-pad's so responsive, you don't really need it. But games like N64, I mean, not all games are going to work perfectly. And I've been mashing on these L and R buttons on the top, and they're very clicky and responsive. I really like them, actually. And here's some Mega Man Maverick Hunter X on the PSP. But one thing you have to keep in mind is that on a budget handheld like this, not every PSP game is going to work. Not every N64 game is going to work. But the level of performance that Anbernic's offering people for the price of their handhelds is awesome. So I can't see how you'll go wrong or be disappointed with what you get for this price range. And here's some Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 3 on PlayStation 1, and I'm having no issue whatsoever. I gotta say, it's pretty comfortable though. I could have a long gaming session with this, but again, I wouldn't recommend this as your main handheld. But if you are interested in a mini handheld, I'd highly recommend this one, especially if you're a fan of the Anbernic RG35XX series. A special thank you to geekgoo.com for sending me this over for review. They also offered my viewers a 10% off code using the code GET10OFF on their website. They also use PayPal on their website, which I like to see. So you can see under the RetroArch menu, you have a bunch of emulators, and you'll notice that my screen's a bit bright, so you can hit the menu button on top and go in and customize whatever you want. Now that screen brightness level 1, you can see that it can go pretty bright and dark for such a small screen. So that looks much better. But what you'll notice when you're scrolling through the game emulators menus is that it does not have N64 listed here. But it does exist. All you have to do is add an N64 game. I also love other things that they include on here, like Pico 8, a vertical arcade emulator where you can switch the handheld vertical. And it's hilarious to me that they've started to include the Virtual Boy emulator on their cards. That's definitely a bit of nostalgia for me growing up in the 90s. And if you're in a game, you can hit the menu button to access the RetroArch quick menu, and if you hit B, you'll access the full main menu. And obviously there's a ton of stuff you can customize within RetroArch. So you can really make this handheld your own, and they made a lot of smart choices when they were making this. One tip you should know is that if you're in Game Boy, you'll have this gray screen, so if you want that classic green screen, just hit the menu button and go down to Options, and then you'll see Game Boy Colorization. Under there, just hit Custom, and it'll already be set up for you. So resume your game, and you'll have this classic green screen. It's also nice to know that you can save favorites, and you even have games history here. You can search for games, and it has an app center with music and video and ebooks and stuff like that. And you've got your settings menu where you can go in and customize different things like resetting your RetroArch settings.